Hello, and welcome to the Planter Podcast, where we talk about veggie gardening and try to make it easier for you to grow food. I'm one of your hosts, Peter, and I'm a community gardener. And
I'm Erin. I'm a market gardener based in Ontario, Canada.
I'm Mylon Turner, an urban gardener here in Atlanta, Georgia.
all right, and this week we have a very special guest, one of our own Planter Growing Guide authors, Samantha, who is an herb expert, and that's all that we're going to be talking about today, herbs. Welcome, Samantha.
Hello, I'm Samantha. I
Hello.
live in Pacific Northwest, backyard gardener slash like small hobby farm, medicinal herb garden.
Great. So, Aaron, how about you start us off with some of your questions that you have for Samantha?
Sure. I have so many questions lined up for you, Samantha. But first of all, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got into, growing herbs and using herbs and what kinds of things you tend to use them for.
Yeah, so I've always been interested in plants my whole life. My parents, mostly my mom and grandparents, were very into gardening and all that. But I lived in the high desert in California, so we didn't really have any plants at all. But I do remember when I was younger, we had an aloe plant in the house, and one time I cut myself, I think, and my mom used it to help it get better. And I was just instantly fascinated that moment that you can use plants for things like to help you. And so I just remember that being probably my first herb encounter, not really knowing it. But and then I moved to the Pacific Northwest when I was a little bit older after that incident. And there's so many plants up here in forest life. And I just got the chance to being outside and hiking in nature and just coming into contact with so many plants. And that just made my love grow more. But I didn't really know that I could do anything with that as I grew up. So I just didn't really think of plants as a career. Unfortunately, I wish I could go back and, kind of start over. But as an adult, I've been able to learn a lot more about herbs and gardening. I used to work in some offices for a while, and then I decided to go to a skincare school. But I wanted to go to a natural one because I just felt like that was more interesting to me. So I did get the chance to become an esthetician based on using like creams and lotions and things that were infused with plants. And so that's kind of where my professional learning started. I eventually became a mom, and my kids always, being little kids, scraping their knees or getting cuts or whatever. And so I kind of went back to that. Oh yeah, like I can use aloe for this, or I can use calendula for, cuts and things. And so I started buying products with that, those kind of things in mind. But after a while, they can get expensive. And I started realizing like, hey, I bet I could make these at home and maybe for cheaper since I already have some of the plants. And so that kind of is where I decided to start making my own things. But I also wanted to know if I was making them correctly. So I started seeking out like online learning, and I found a couple of like correspondence programs from some herbalists that I really like. And so I would do, tests and things with them and mail it back and forth. And that was a year of that. But I decided I want to do more. And so I found like an online one where you do Zoom meetings. You still meet every week. And that was great, but I still wanted more hands-on learning. So I was able to find a really great herbalist like an hour away from me. And she offers in-learning person at her house. She has a very large medicinal herb garden outside. So that was great because I got to do all the hands-on growing of medicinal herbs, which is really hard to learn about through a book or online, obviously. So I did. She had 2 10-month programs. And so I completed both of those with her. And so that was it's been really helpful and great. And so, yeah, now I don't sell anything I make. I make a lot of stuff for friends and family, and I use a lot on my own family. But yeah, so that's kind of a short version, I guess.
That's
of that.
awesome.
Yeah.
And so what would you say, like you said, your family did a lot of gardening growing up. So was your entry point to gardening, was it really just, growing veggie gardens, or was it your interest in using herbs for skincare and other purposes that really sort of spurred your interest in gardening?
I would say definitely the vegetable gardening part and the flower gardening. My mom did a lot of flowers, and my grandparents had a lot of vegetables though. And so I always watched them out there doing their garden. And I tried as a little kid to have my own gardens, but again, we lived in the high desert and I didn't really have all the support, I guess, or what I was doing, needed more help. But and then as a teenager, when I lived in the Northwest, my mom had a really big like flower and vegetable garden. But when you're a teenager, that's not, I don't know, I kind of like hid that part of me, I guess. It's not really cool or something. But I would have I had a couple green bean patches of my own. But yes, I would say traditional gardening is really what sparked that. And also then the more I found out about herbs, a lot of vegetables can be considered a medicinal herb or shrubs and trees. And so that kind of fascinated me. Like you would just think it's just there for looks, but you can actually use it. So that really kind of inspired me too a lot. And then I live in an area that has a lot of Native American history. And so it was just fascinating learning stuff in school about trees they used or, different flowers that can be used for things. So I would say, yes, my environment around me really influenced a lot in just traditional gardening.
And what percentage do you think your garden is like herbs to veggies and other edibles?
That's a good question. I would say 50-50, I guess. I mean, obviously the vegetable thing right now is not really anything going on out there. And,
that's fair.
But yeah, I guess 50-50, and considering a lot of the kitchen herbs are medicinal too, I guess those can overlap. But yeah.
Because I like
years.
I enjoy growing herbs, but I've never grown a ton of them. Like I'd say maybe it's 10% of the things that I would grow, both in a market garden context and at home. It's, it hasn't been something I've really delved into quite as deeply. So it's interesting to learn about, how much variety there really is and all the different uses. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the fact that you could actually be growing a lot of your edible plants for other, purposes as well. So
yeah, some things you might not think about, like horseradish, maybe. I don't really love it for the flavor, but I do grow it because it's great for sinus things. So
yeah, it will clear your sinuses right away.
Yeah.
How about we go around and just say our experience with the herbs? So in Samantha, you are expert level.
No,
I feel like I'm bare bottom beginner level. I grew basil, oregano, chives, catnip. There we go. Four things.
That's cilantro?
Yeah.
No, yeah, okay. Maybe 5. Cilantro. Yep. So, yeah, and it's all for food, eating purposes. I haven't yet to venture into the medicinal uses.
That's kind of you don't know it, but that is a way of herbalism. A lot of it is more, just the everyday habits, the little things you do, those little herbs every day, they add up. So you don't even know you are an herbalist.
Yeah, so I'm kind of similar to Peter. I've got rosemary, thyme, oregano, basil, cilantro, parsley, and lemon balm this year. But yeah, I kind of treated it the same way as the things that are edible, things that I would say more culinary. I want to dive into more. And this is a question for later, though, but I'm really interested in hearing how you handle interplanting with your garden being close to 50-50. Are you planting like
Mhm.
herbs, amongst the vegetables, or do you have beds
Mhm.
dedicated to herbs and vegetables, and how you plan and arrange that?
Mhm. I do both. Um, I do have some spots that I designate just, this is the herb. Like a lot of my root herbs will live in one area, or, the drier loving ones like yarrow and lavender are kind of one area. But I do use my vegetable beds for like, there's an herb, holy basil or tulsi. I just throw that in with near my tomatoes, kind of like a regular basil would be. Um, and things like chives, those can kind of be in regular. And then I grow ashwagandha, and it goes pretty well. Like you kind of treat it as a tomato almost. It's in the same family. I just throw it in with my regular vegetable area. So there are some things you can do that with.
Holy basil was one I forgot about. I did, and the reason why I forget about that one is I did have it planted in kind of like a dedicated area, but the wind carried the seed over into a few beds, and it produced some amazing volunteer plants. And what I
Mhm.
noticed is it drew in quite a few pollinators. So I'm glad you said that.
Oh, yeah. I had the same instance with some holy basil showing up in gravel paths, and I just let it go. I'm like, okay. And yeah, it's great for bees, all those little flowers.
They love it, and you walk by and you brush it, and it has kind of like a bubble gum
Hmm.
type scent to it. So I understand why they love it so much.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It is interesting though, like as we're talking. So a lot of times when you think about planting herbs, you think about, well, I'm just going to throw all my herbs together because I want, a handy, convenient herb garden. But
Yeah.
in reality, herbs have some pretty unique needs sometimes, like compared to some of the annual veggies, tend to be kind of, okay, fertile soil, keep them moist, but not waterlogged, lots of sun. Whereas herbs
Yeah.
can have, some pretty unique needs. And some of them actually like being mistreated almost a little bit. So
Yeah.
when you're thinking about your garden, Smith, is that literally how you divvy them up? Is just by like, okay, these are, the ones that can take some abuse. They want the poor soil. They can dry out.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you think about it?
Yeah, I think kind of with any kind of a planting you would do, especially since a lot of herbs can be perennial, you're going to want to put some thought into it because they might be there for a while. And so, especially, the Mediterranean herbs that like that good drainage and hot areas or places with lots of rock, you don't necessarily always want to grow your vegetables and that kind of stuff. So they might need their own area. And then there are some herbs that can handle being waterlogged or really need a lot of moisture that a lot of other plants in general would rot. So, yeah, there are some things you can't just throw wherever you want. You have to kind of know that what they need. So that sometimes might require some research, especially with a medicinal herb you might not know that much about and not that many people are growing. And there are things that I've tried and just they don't work, even though how much I want them to work. I've tried growing some southwestern herbs, and like I gave them their own pot, and I gave them, really good drainage and hot, and it just nope, hasn't been successful. So sometimes just where you are, I think, can be tricky. But yes, definitely have to think about a little bit more in advance of where you're going to put some things, because yeah, they're just might not work, and you'd be kind of sad. Some things you have to wait years before you can even harvest them, or you should harvest them, and then it can be a big disappointment if you put it in a spot that wasn't a good spot for it. So it can be a little bit tricky. Trial and error, like all gardening, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of harvesting, I don't know, do we want to get into attempting our herbal infused oil at this point?
We could do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
I'm
yeah.
really excited to to do this because I harvest and dry herbs a lot, but then beyond that, I don't, other than cooking with them, I don't do much else. So this is pretty exciting.
Yeah. So, I mean, herb oils are great for, you can make culinary infused herbal oils, which you can, just kind of make salad dressings with, or just enhance your saute or whatever you're got going on. So, of course, in those cases, you just want to make sure it's a good tasting herb and one that you can have in food amounts. But if you want to get like skin benefits from it, then herb oils are pretty much the best way to go. And so the oil will extract certain constituents or, things in that herb that can have different effects on your skin. And it's really easy to do. And usually you have most of the materials needed. It's just need a jar of any size. I mean, if you want to make a little bit or a lot, just depends on what you're going to do with it, I guess. And then you need your dried herbs and making yes.
I have a question. So I'm gonna add a little. I have another camera with a setup here. Okay. We can add it to the stage.
Mm-hmm.
Mute my mic. Okay. Am I echoing at all? No, good. Okay, because I'm hearing an echo. All right. So you said a little jar, some oil, and like what oils would you recommend?
Okay, so it kind of depends on what you're making, but usually I feel like most people use an olive oil just because it extracts things very well. It's pretty neutral and it's a very shelf stable oil. But if you are going to make something like, if you're going to make a lotion or you just wanted to use the oil just as is on your skin, you could choose a lighter one, like an almond oil or apricot, but those can be a lot more expensive too. So you have to think about that. But also avocado oil works great. It's pretty neutral. And then coconut oil, people use that too, and you can, but if it's not the fractionated liquid kind, you'd have to heat it up first. So it will, be liquid for your herbs. But those are all pretty good choices. Some people use sunflower oil because it's very light and neutral, but that one can not last as long on average, I guess. And then some people prefer not to use certain like seed oils or certain oils. Like I would not suggest using like a regular cooking oil like canola or something. That's just, I would avoid that. So I just mostly use olive oil or avocado oil. And so that's my oil.
And so if you were making an infused oil more for skincare use, what are the kinds of things you might use that on your skin for? And is there any considerations, like, let's say if you have acne or other skin conditions, are there certain types of oils or what would you be thinking about there?
Yeah, that's a good question because some can be, kind of non-comedogenic or comedogenic. I don't know that word, but skin clogging basically. Olive oil in general, it is kind of heavier feeling. So if you don't like that, I wouldn't use it, but it does have a lot of anti-inflammatory properties in the actual olive oil itself. So it just kind of depends on your skin. It could be soothing for you, but if it's too heavy, then that's probably not a good one. A good one for like acne prone skin would be more like a lighter one. Argan oil or apricot oil is pretty good. Some people get fancy and use like meadow foam oil for skin. It's really nice for like mature skin, and it's kind of a newer up and coming. It's from these little flowers. Actually in Oregon, I think we produce the most in the world. And it's really shelf stable, but it could be a little bit more expensive. But so that's another good one for skin. And then as far as herbs go, like for someone that's more acne prone, you could get like a yarrow can be antibacterial benefits or antifungal. If you're going for like just cuts and scrapes kind of a thing, calendula is like pretty much the best for that. There are a lot of studies on it, how it shows it can help repair the skin cells and just be very soothing and calming and just speed up repair of the skin. Comfrey is another very popular herb for skin. But if you read about that, there's a lot of just warning of not putting it on like punctured or really deep cuts, because there are some things in comfrey that could potentially affect people's liver. So you just want to be mindful of that with comfrey, but that is another great herb for skin.
And I guess this is where we should roll the disclaimer too. So if you're applying things on your skin or using things for those kinds of benefits,
right.
Be sure to do your research, test it on small patches, and potentially consult with an herbalist as needed.
Yeah, so I was gonna definitely mention that, because it's not to say that herbs are going to replace regular medicine. That's not what any herbalist wants to put out there. But obviously, if you have a very infected wound or very deep, then you want to address that a different way. But an herbal salve can be a great just helper in just everyday kind of little cuts and scrapes. And yes, there are certain herbs. Everyone can be allergic to anything. So if you have an extreme worry, I would do a little patch test before. And especially things like yarrow, which are generally very great for the skin. For some people, yarrow can be very irritating too. So you kind of, I guess, have to keep that in mind with certain things. But so yes, make sure if you have any allergy infos, make sure you know the plant family too, because plants are all members of families, and sometimes you can react to a whole family of them. So if you have things you worry about, I would look that up before using it.
So I had a quick question, Samantha. You talked us through the different types of oil. Do you have any recommendations on sourcing? Are you better sticking off with purchasing local, or is it safe to purchase from online as well?
I would say local is great if you know where your stuff is coming from, and I feel like more local things are transparent with their buyers because they want your business. So if you can find someone you trust, that's fine. With oils, I really recommend to finding the cold pressed oil, meaning it hasn't been heated up and that it hasn't been, extracted using weird solvents or, just stuff like that. And also, I know there's a big thing with olive oil going on with finding it's actually not olive oil in the jar, even though it says it is. So that can be a little tricky. I guess you'll have to research that on your own if that's something that worries you. But as far as online companies to get oil, there's Mountain Rose Herbs, which is what I really love them. They're actually out of Eugene in Oregon. They have a lot of carrier oils that are usually, most of them organic, but they really test for things in their stuff. They visit the farms, and I feel like they're pretty trustworthy for skincare things. And then there's another Oregon-based skincare. What are they called? Oof. I can't think of their Shea Company. They do a lot of different kind of carrier oils. So if you want like a more fancy one, like a meadow foam oil, they have it, and they list everything on their website. So they're very trustworthy. But this is from Costco. I don't always get it, but if I'm eating it, I feel like I can probably use it for skincare stuff. So I guess it's just what you trust and what you would use for your cooking. I think that's important to note.
Is a carrier oil just any oil that you're looking to infuse? Yeah,
so I guess carrier oil, meaning, yes, an oil that you would be using for your infusion. And so that can be any of the oils I mentioned.
Now my question is about the herbs. So I've got here, I'm going to try to make it bigger. This is basil that I picked from my garden, and it's like really chunky. How how much do you need to process it to get it into an infusion? I want
You
to
don't
use
have
this
to
on
do-
pizza is what my imagination is
Okay,
saying.
so you're making like a culinary infusion.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just chop it up. I just chop it like I would be cooking, or you can even just crumble it up if it's not that, I mean, scientific, but it is
Okay.
better to get more broken down so the oil has more, goodness to extract. It's best to, yes, chop it up or crumble it up
Okay.
before you put it in your jar.
And then
which
so
I have all my
you just take this,
Yep.
put it in the jar, and then you add the oil. Basically, that's all that you do.
It's really easy. So you basically want to get your jar like about halfway full. You can
Okay.
make it more full if you
I'm
want.
just gonna do this
So
live.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
And this
I'm
is,
following along too. I'm also doing a culinary oil. I've got some olive oil. Samantha, I was gonna rhyme off some possible ingredients, and maybe you could suggest which one would be best. So I've got rosemary. These are all dried. Do the herbs have to be dried to make it?
Okay, so yes, that's a good point too. It is best to do dried herbs when you're making an oil because if there is any moisture, there's a chance of mold developing or, just turning more rancid. And so, yeah, there are a couple of exceptions. Like if you're making a St. John's wort infused oil, it's preferred to use a slightly dried flower. But then you would just keep an eye on it more so you don't see anything weird growing on top. But yes, dried is best.
And you
be
said
safest.
halfway full, maybe?
Yeah, halfway is good.
Okay. Like packed it or just loose?
You can pack it or loose.
Okay.
This is called the folk method, meaning there aren't
Okay.
really too many rules.
Okay.
Just as long as you can get
And
the
then
oil
you
in
just
there.
pour the oil on top? And
Yep, just pour your oil
Okay.
on top. You want to
All right.
leave about half an inch of head space, a little bit, because
Half
if you
an inch.
overfill it,
It's a
they
very
can-
small container. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. And then
Does-
what do you do with it after? So I'm just going to seal it up. That's
Mhm.
how long do you have to wait for all that
So
flavory goodness?
traditional is 4 to 6 weeks. If you're doing this method, just the cold infusion method, and you want to give it a little, good shake. And so 4 to 6 weeks, you would store it in a dark area that's fairly warm, not too warm, not too cold. And then check on it every couple of days, and you want to give it a little shake.
Okay.
And then also labeling is important because you don't want to forget what you made and the date. So I always just I'm not fancy, so I use masking tape because it comes off easy, but so
It
you just want
works.
to label your herb and like what did you use? I put olive oil and then the
I used
date.
olive oil. Yeah.
So that way you can remember, oh yeah, that was about 4 weeks ago, or or someone doesn't see it in your pantry and be like, what is this? And then,
So
yeah,
Aaron,
just
what
every couple
Aaron, what
days.
are you thinking about doing?
Well, I was going to do a culinary oil. So I have a bunch of herbs from my garden that I've dried. So I'll maybe rhyme them off. And then Samantha, if you want to suggest if there's like one that you think would be particularly good or like a combination, you can let me know. So I've
Okay.
got rosemary, thyme, oregano, dill, and some dried red chilies, little Thai chilies here.
Ooh, those look good. I mean, what do you want to make with it? Just cooking or salad dressings or?
Yeah, I think it would probably be either salad dressings or like maybe something you could just sprinkle on your pasta at the end, like after you've cooked it and sauced it, something along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, I think any of the Mediterranean herbs can go well together. I really love rosemary, so
All right, we'll do
I
rosemary.
feel like, I don't know, it's kind of a personal thing, I guess. But I mean, rosemary has a lot of health benefits too. I mean, they all do, but I really like rosemary for the mind boost it's supposed to give you, and helps preserve the oil too with its vitamin E and just antioxidants. So I don't know, even if you don't want rosemary to be your strongest flavor, I guess I would always just put a tiny bit maybe.
Nice. And how much, like when Peter was using the basil, he was pretty generous, but with rosemary, with the sprigs, like maybe, so I
Yeah.
have a bottle. I'll see if I can put it on the screen. It's just sort of, well, it doesn't really show up very well. It's, I don't know, maybe half a liter.
Hmm.
I don't know what that would be in, in imperial measurements.
Oh my God,
No one knows.
but you made a good point. Rosemary is very strong, and so
Mm.
I probably wouldn't do half especially if you don't want rosemary to be the main. You could probably just do a quarter.
Okay.
But I mean, also I think it's probably just personal preference. But yeah, that would be a lot of rosemary though.
Okay.
Now, for cooking infused oils, such as like the basil or the rosemary, do you strain it and just use the oil when you're going about cooking, or could you just leave the herbs in there?
You could just leave them in there if
Okay.
that's all you want to use them. I mean, it might just get stronger over time, and just maybe check and make sure they're not growing anything weird after a while. I haven't left any in there, but you could.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just
Is
gonna
there-
use this on pizza, so like
Hmm.
more basil on the pizza, like sure.
Is
Yeah.
there any benefit of using like the stems, so especially like in the rosemary where you've got, the woody
Mhm.
stem and then the leafy part? Is
Yeah.
there any benefit of using both there, or should you just stick to the leaves?
Well, in general, the stems, what I've learned anyway, is the stems don't really carry too much of anything beneficial as far as the medicinal part, but flavor part, I'm not sure if you're just going for that. But in general, like with making herbal medicines, the stems kind of not really the vitality that we've learned is just like in the leaves or going down in the roots. The stems just kind of its way to get it up and
Pass
down.
through.
So
Got
I
it.
guess it's up to you, but I don't know, maybe not. And I know sometimes like if you're making an herbal tea, there are a lot of stem pieces in there, but it's just more kind of sometimes a pain to get the stems out. But
Yeah, so more bang for your buck in the leaves.
yeah, that's just what I've learned. I don't know if someone out there knows like, no, stems are good, but what I've learned is they're just not really not
Got
the
it.
best stuff is not all in there. So
And if you were going to give this as a gift, is there anything you would do differently or specific? Like, would you strain it first? Could you leave the little bits in just for like, so people know what's in it? Like they see the rosemary and they see the garlic and.
yeah, you could do that. And then just maybe remind them like, or just make it in a smaller containers if you think maybe they wouldn't use it up before the time to check to make sure everything's still good. Because it should be fine, but you don't know if some steam got in there or water got in mixed in somehow and things might start growing more. But so yeah, you could either just be like, oh hey, just check every once in a while, or keep water out of it, or maybe using smaller containers for gifting would be good. And for gifting, any container, I would choose to use like a darker amber or a darker green bottle and not a clear unless you're going to use it pretty quickly. It just helps prevent like oxidation and going bad faster. So like I always store everything in darker containers and keeping them out of the light. So and you don't know if you're going to gift them to someone, they might just leave them out on the counter, which would be fine. But if they were in a bottle like this, it would keep it fresher longer. And then labeling. I mean, I label everything, especially if I'm giving it to someone, just because, if someone has allergies or someone else tries it and they don't know what's in it. So I think labeling is a good thing for gifting. And you can be fancy or just make a little tag, just something.
And with with canning and home preserving, there's often a lot of, concern and like processes you need to follow just in terms of avoiding foodborne illnesses. Is there any concerns about that with the oils, or are the oils generally a little bit safer?
Well, that is a good question. As far as if you're getting the herbs from yourself at home, I mean, that's, I guess, things to be mindful of is, okay, is this coming from an area where my pets get into all the time? Or there could be, you know, if you see dirt on it, obviously before you harvest it, I would be extra careful to, you know, wash it off. Things like that, yeah, because there is a potential, I guess, for bacteria to be on anything. And but the herbal oils, once stuff is dried, it's kind of hard for there to be a bunch of bacteria. There's always a chance it could be, but in general, you're a little safer when they're dried. And then, and if you're using the oil, especially on something you're cooking with, that helps diminish chance of anything, I guess. But yeah, just if you are sourcing the herbs yourself, you know, wash your hands before you harvest. If you do have a lot of dirt on things, I spray my herbs like the day before I'm going to harvest them with a hose, and then harvest them in the morning when they're still, you know, dry. They're dry, hopefully, and still clean. And then drying them in a clean way, you know, not just sitting out on the counter, dust flying on it or something. So yeah, and then as far as when you're making everything, just trying your best to keep any liquid out of the process at all, accidentally, or yeah. And
So
then of course, when you're straining and all that, you know, make sure your hands are clean, kitchen's clean, bottles are clean that you're, you know, storing them in. That's a good, if you buy them from somewhere, I always wash them right when I get them, just so I know they're clean, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of liquids, in the preliminary talks, we've talked about also doing infused vinegars. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about starting with those?
Yeah, so it's pretty much the same process as making an oil, but vinegars can be even considered, I guess, more medicinal. You can make salad dressings with them and stuff, but vinegars are really good at extracting some of the constituents that oil can't get out. And they're a popular choice for people who just want to take like a tablespoon a day, or, you know, add it to honey. Adding honey and herbal vinegars is really popular it's called like a fire cider. But especially apple cider vinegar is popular to make with herbal infusions, because the vinegar itself, you know, has probiotics, I think, and just kind of people use it for heartburn and stuff. So it can add a whole nother level of things just by the vinegar. And then vinegar is pretty, you know, like, yeah, some water can get in it, but, you know, it lasts a long time. It's pretty shelf stable, I guess is what I'm saying. Mm-hmm.
Is there an acidic percentage that we want to be looking for?
I think the typical 5%, I've used that. I have one that's 6%. I found a stronger one when I was making some fire ciders. So as long as you're using dried herbs, especially, that won't change the percent. But if you are making one with fresh herbs, you will keep that in mind, that it will, you know, the moisture from the fresh herbs will come out into the vinegar and lessen the percent there. So that's something to think about. And then in that case, a lot of people just store their vinegars in the fridge to help minimize anything. But yes, if you're using fresh, it can make the shelf stability lessen.
So you were talking a little bit about the process for drying your herbs, and I think it's a good time of year. I mean, maybe veering on the edge. Some of us are getting pretty cold right now, but what are some of the things that you do at the end of your gardening season with your herbs, both in terms of harvesting and preserving, and in terms of just like your herb garden cleanup?
Yeah, so harvesting, most of my herbs I do harvest in the summer because they're more the aerial parts, flowers, leaves. It's always crazy in the summer for me when I decide to try to harvest everything. It seems like everything's at once. Same with vegetables, I guess. But so that that's a crazier time. And in the fall, it slows down a little bit. But for things like roots, that can take more time than just going out and snipping some leaves and coming in. So that takes more consideration of, is it time for me to do it? Like, how long has that plant been there? And so digging it up, you got to be ready to prepare your herbs then if you're going to dry them or make them fresh. So that's always a consideration harvest wise. All right now, and then I do have a lot of herbs that are just kind of wild, like wild berries, like hawthorn berries. And so that I just watch them, like now is the time I would do that. Go out there and get those, but I don't have to really think that much for that one. But as far as the cleaning up, I was out there the other day, and it's kind of similar to when you're going through the end of season, your vegetable garden, just old dead things that are just kind of in the way a little bit. But I'm kind of a messy gardener though. I like to leave a lot, especially for the birds. And I mean, a lot of the seed heads are still on there. And so I do leave a lot of those out there, and a lot of butterflies and things tend to lay their eggs around, dead stalks and whatever. So if I do trim up some things, it just looks too bad, I just make a little pile and leave it over, and hopefully don't disturb too many little, bugs, eggs and things. But there are some things that I don't want getting too out of control. So like lemon balm, I know someone, Mylan mentioned that. Yeah, I'm out there clipping those seed heads because it's just crazy with lemon balm out there. So that is something to think about. If you bring in certain herbs, sometimes they have a nickname of being a weed. And so right now is a good time to go out there. And if you don't want hundreds of lemon balms, then I'm out there getting those out. Calendula, I love it, but it's kind of out of control and taking over. So I've been out there it's still growing. I don't know how it is, but it's so cold out there, but it's still growing. But I've been out thinning them out, trying to get some of the seeds out that I can. Yeah, so you have to think about those kind of herbs, which I love them, and borage, another one, it's a little bit wild and out of control. So now I'm starting to see in the garden their little first year growing. I have to decide, do I really want that next year? So some of those are getting removed. And then as far as, like the perennials, was this a good spot for it? If it wasn't, now is a good time to be moving those out of where you think they would be doing better. And just looking out for little baby plants, like, is a good time of year. If you have friends or someone that, like, I have so much yarrow, I was out there just moving babies and putting them in pots, and I'm going to be giving those away. And so right now is a good time for that. And then as far as like protecting things, I don't have too many things that, like I said, when I tried to grow them here and they died. And so, but there are a couple of things that I do move away, like into the greenhouse, or it's really a cold frame. So they won't get drenched all winter because it rains a lot here. And so I start thinking about stuff like that, what needs to be a little bit protected. Rosemary can be, I've had rosemary bushes live a long time, but if I get an ice storm up here, that's something I have to think about. I have to get out there and cover them up with fleece or something. So I just make sure, okay, do I have the fleece ready for that? Or, do I have things I need to protect? But, and then seed saving, it's a little bit late for me to be doing that now, but if you're somewhere that's still warm or dry and you have seed heads, it's a really good time to be out there and collecting seeds if you want to start them in the spring. And that's another thing to think about, is like the herbs that need stratification. So they need that period of cold. Either you can get the seeds now and do that, in your fridge, but like with echinacea seeds, you can put them in there for a couple of months in the fridge to kind of trick them into thinking they've been out all winter. So that is something to think about if you plan on having some of those herbs and they need to be in a cold period, is to start looking at those herb online. I know a lot of catalogs aren't out yet, but so that's something to think about. Trying to think. I mean,
Well, I
weed
had
removal.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A question for you. So, with the annual herbs, like, of course, whatever's still growing, just go ahead and harvest it because, it's going to die, or even some of the biennials, right? It's just,
Yeah.
it's kind of now or never. But with the perennials, I mean, I think sometimes the instinct is to just go and harvest as much as possible because, you're going to dry it and use it through the winter. But is that something you would recommend, or do we need to give them a little break?
With the perennials, like right now harvesting, or just
like let's say you had a thyme plant and you're like, oh, I'm going to go and snip it all off because I want to dry it. Is that going to affect it, do you think, for the following year?
I don't know like the scientific answer to that. In my feeling, right now I'm letting it be. Like, I do have a thyme plant out there that looked really nice, and I was thinking about clipping some off. Then I thought, I don't know if that would stress it, or we have some really cold weather coming up. I didn't know. I guess maybe it depends on where you are. Like, maybe Milan could do that. I think maybe it's pretty mellow temperatures where you are. I don't know. I'm just guessing, but we might have some really cold weather soon. I don't know if that would just stress it or not.
So the guide that I've been following for stuff like thyme and oregano is getting close to the woody parts of the stem, but not getting too deep into that, just to allow some growth.
Yeah.
Because just like you said, our temps are still swinging pretty wildly. We don't have frost in the 10-day forecast yet still, and we will be, that's 2 weeks, we'll be at December. So I did do a moderate prune, but like I said, not getting into the really woody parts of the stem. And I did that for rosemary, thyme, and oregano. The lemon balm, I don't know how that plant is still alive. It's in a big grow bag, and I have ignored it completely. It's not on the irrigation system with everything else. It's not in the raised beds. It's just right there next to the raised bed. And it's even in a pretty shaded spot. But that thing just keeps growing and keep growing. I did hit it over the summer. I came through with the hedge trimmer and just lopped 50% of it off. And it just was like, thanks, let's grow some more now.
Yeah.
So, that's just kind of how it goes. But now I do want to get into, I want to learn a little bit more about some of the medicinals. And one of the ones you did mention was echinacea. So I do have seeds for that. Give Peter and I maybe 2 or 3 more ideas of some really, really easy medicinal herb plants that we can start off with, either now with like cold stratifications, or those first things we can do early spring.
Keyword easy. We need
Easy. Okay, well, I mean, I've mentioned yarrow a couple of times. I don't know if you have any, and the medicinal one is the white one, not the red or yellow ones, but that one is very easy to grow. It's very useful. Butterflies, bugs love it. It's pretty easy. So I would recommend that. And it's just great for so many things, I think. It's probably a lot of herbalists' top 5. It's something like, I see this and a lot of people, they're just amazed by it. If you get a cut on your finger, it can help stop the bleeding like almost instantly. It's just one of those herbs that wow, it sparks people's interest, because that works so fast, and it, I don't know, I think it's great, and it's an easy one to find.
What part of the yarrow plant would we most likely be using?
Leaves and flowers, but the leaves stop bleeding really well. But you can also use it in tea blends or skincare things. And that one's pretty easy to find, I would say. And it grows really easy from seed. You could probably start some in the spring.
You mentioned tea. I do a lot of tea. I drink a lot of tea, green tea. Is there any sort of herbal tea that you'd recommend that I could grow?
Well, if you haven't yet, the holy basil tulsi,
Okay.
it is
I
really
have not
easy
done
to
that yet.
grow, and it tastes, I don't know, I think it's one of the best tasting herbal teas you can have. And it's just great for a wide range of things, like promoting calmness, and it has antiviral properties, and you can throw it in your garden like the other kind of basils. And so I think that's another great beginner herb that it's pretty easy to grow. I don't know if you are a fan of California poppy. That one's, sometimes people already have it in their garden. That
Yeah.
grows very easily, but it does need well, I'm not sure. I think it needs a cold period to grow. So if that's something you want to look into, it might not need one. But I really like that as an herb. It's pretty gentle. Even kids can partake in using poppy, and it's really easy. And you can get the seeds at a lot of garden centers too.
Is that the same poppy that you see on hamburger buns and like poppy seeds?
No, it's not the same seed.
Okay.
I don't think. Yeah. I'm sure you could maybe eat that seed. Probably wouldn't be the same though, but I don't think that's the same seed that's on those.
Gotcha.
But yeah, as far as, and then myelin, I mean, lemon balm, it's kind of a pest, but it's also an amazing beginner herb, and it's a great tasting tea, but it has a lot of antiviral properties, and there's a lot of studies on it specifically to like cold sore viruses and herpes viruses and chickenpox. And I don't know, it's a
Yep.
really versatile, easy herb.
I was just looking that up when you mentioned it before. It is in the mint family, so definitely
Go
put it
crazy.
put it in a container
Yeah.
so it doesn't go loose.
So you said that was a good one for teas. Does that need to be dried first, or can I just cut and go right into
I
teas?
think in general, when making tea, dried is the way to go. Fresh teas, I don't know. For me, they just kind of taste off. But yeah, and the thing with lemon balm, it's usually the best fresh within the last like 6 months.
Mhm.
So that one's really one kind of you want freshly dried. But
Okay.
yeah, I would dry it first. But it's pretty.
Adam, I'm going to
pretty
try
good.
that one this week.
You could make like a cold fresh infusion. You just adding a few leaves to like just some water and
top
letting
it
it
off.
sit overnight or just a couple hours, and it's pretty good too.
Awesome.
But it's I really like lemon balm. But yeah, as far as in the garden though, it's a little wild. So
So this is a little bit random, but I grow catnip for my cats, and I keep it in a container because it also spreads like crazy. Learned that the hard way. And then I was in a tea shop and I saw catnip tea, and I was like really? So does it have good properties for people
Yes.
as well as cats?
Yep, it has also. I think it has some antiviral properties. It's used a lot traditionally for like fevers, helping just kind of lower it, or just the feeling of getting it lower. It's really helpful for children that are having trouble sleeping or just restless when they have an illness. It does have the mild sedative properties for humans. Yeah, it does a lot of stuff too, and it's not too bad tasting. I like it, and it's also very helpful for if you have nausea or just like vomiting that won't stop. Sometimes just getting a little bit of that down can help just stop it or take the edge off.
Is there any chance it will turn you into a cat?
Sadly,
Start
no.
rolling on the floor.
No. And so, yes, that's another, yep, it's a good tea herb right there, and easy to grow, as you found out. I can't keep any around because of cats and dogs, so it's kind of annoying, but
Yeah, I started growing it. My cat doesn't care. She's like, whatever. Doesn't really
yes,
give
I
a
was
shit.
reading that some cats don't care, that it doesn't affect them. There's a small percentage of cats that it doesn't.
So maybe I can use it for some of the other uses you just mentioned. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
Mhm.
all is lost.
Yep.
But yes, that's a good one to have too.
Is there anything else that we want to talk about? Because we're approaching the end of our show. So,
I did have one more that I wanted to ask
okay.
about specifically. So it's actually kind of two in one because you talked about the plant families. But one of the ones I was looking up was calendula, and I know people use the flowers for teas and things as well.
Mhm.
But it mentioned that calendula and marigold were kind of in the same family.
Mhm.
Are those combinations that you're familiar with?
Yeah, so I know they are in the same family, I believe. And as far as using like the marigold, people, I think they do use it herbally. I have not because I just have calendula everywhere. But I think people can use that. I don't know if they're exactly interchangeable in the ways of, I'm sure they have similar herbal properties, but I'm really not sure on that one.
Okay. Marigold is just one of those that we always have around for whatever reason, and it
Uh-huh.
self-populates like crazy.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Ooh, if there are other ways I can use that for than just having it around, that would be really cool."
Mhm. I'll look into that more. That because I have thought that also, but I have not used it for anything. Calendula just takes over here, so I just have that everywhere.
And with the calendula, you just pop the flowers as well.
Yep, just pop the flowers. Dry. They are tougher to dry or take longer to dry, and you want to make sure they're dry before you store them because they're so resiny and thick.
Mm-hmm.
And one time I thought I got them all dry, put them away, and next month I had to throw it all away because mold.
Now,
So,
would you ever use the like a dehydrator to dry yours,
so
or do
I
you take it
I do have a dehydrator. I invested in one because of that calendula reason.
that time? Got it.
So I use it a lot for roots and the calendula and if I'm doing a large batch of things, but otherwise just the paper bag method I use a lot of that way in the summertime, just drying it in the paper bag and making sure there's good airflow and seems to work pretty well.
Awesome.
Mhm.
All right, so I think that's it for our episode on herbs. If you have any questions for Samantha or any of the rest of us, please send us an email at question@planter.garden or ask us on social media with the hashtag PlanterPodcast. All right, and we'll try our best to answer it in an upcoming episode. And I guess that's it for the episode. And we hope you enjoyed it. And I guess we'll all see you next time. All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.